So I want to talk about semiotics. Is that a term you've come across before? Yes. It's basically about the art and science of understanding the kind of deeper meaning of things. Not just counting words or looking for themes, but understanding the kind of energy behind different types of communications. And my view is that having deployed this AI across a whole load of communications for many, many organizations, that there are some kind of universal factors that come into play that we can measure, and we can measure them using AI that is built to detect signals from noise. That's why my company is called Signoi. Now that is the only little sales pitch for you. What I'm going to talk about is, there's an old saying that it takes a witch to catch a witch, right? Now semiotics is often seen as slightly magic-y and witchcrafty, actually. But it's very, very powerful. And it's only quite recently that we've had the technology and the opportunity to do this in a quantitative, computational way without experts sitting in a room poring over the deeper meaning of things, okay? So that presents quite a few opportunities to understand what messages are being transmitted and how people are then likely to receive them. So I'm going to talk about three examples. The concept of safe content, which I think has analogies to some of the challenges faced in the world of disinformation. Trump's tweets take a different angle here, and it's about narrative, understanding narrative through the presence of hidden signals, and visual messaging and how we can understand and maximize the power of that. So what is safe content? Anybody know? It's stuff that advertisers like to be associated with, essentially. It's stuff that they don't think is going to damage their brand. Now, we work for quite a few media organizations, both broadcast and old print, which is now digital, of course. And they're exercised by this because they want to sell more ads, right? Brands don't like to be associated with certain kinds of things. And in the UK, we have a very vibrant and slightly unpleasant tabloid press. There's a whole selection of these newspapers, I'm sure you've come across them, that are quite interesting in their storytelling, okay? Now, when you look at this, you can see that it is reporting factual stories, but you can also see immediately, I think, that it's putting a particular point of view on. So, general election master plan, okay, this is happening. Coward Corbyn to abstain. It's got an agenda, right? So we downloaded about 500,000 of these articles across a whole range of publications with a view for looking at not only the explicit content, a lot about Brexit, as you might imagine, but also how those things cluster into natural content groups. So you can see from this, I hope you can see, that tabloid narratives focus a lot on stories about assaults and death and sickening footage that's captured on social and CCTV. And when we analyze that from the point of view of deploying simple things like sentiment analysis, more complex things like the presence of fear and anger in these narratives, you start to create a view of what's safe and isn't safe, and that's very useful for both publications and brands, and it helps them moderate their tone, it helps them tell stories in different ways. Just a few little examples here from the Daily Star, one of the highest quality papers in the country. When you map all that out and add another layer, which is about the intensity of the language, the intensity of the emotions that are present, you can really start to see that some expressions are very, very negative, very fearful, quite angry in tone, but also very, very intensely expressed. Now, these signals can start to create new metrics, very simple metrics in a way, but quite incisive for what is safe what is borderline, and what potentially is quite unsafe to be associated with. You can do that at the level of the individual article. You can do it at the level of an individual social media post. You know, it's one data point or many. The point is that it's quite scalable, and it gives you insight into what's there without having to physically read it. Because we can't read everything, right? No one's got the time. So that's an analogy which, you know, I hope might be interesting for governmental strategic communications. There are ways of looking at communication, both send and receive signals, that are very, very measurable and give you a discernible DNA for content without ever really looking at the detail of the words. So hidden signals. So the second thing I wanted to talk about goes to a deeper level, which is about measuring meaning. So one of the things we do a lot of is strategic pieces using big data sets, as indeed does Francesco, to understand the kind of hidden signifiers that brands can tap into, or perhaps it's about their competitors, okay? So I wanted to look at Donald Trump's tweets, partly because it's very difficult to share some of the things that we actually do in detail, but also because it's a really unique data set, because it's 10 years worth of it. At the point we downloaded these, 36,500 of these tweets going back to 2010. And what we wanted to do was test out the notion of surfacing, okay? So rather than us going, yeah, okay, that's about buildings, or that's about, you know, my business career, what automatically surfaces if you just throw this stuff into the platform and then look at it over time? And then you look at what's in there and you interpret them. And we find some, you know, quite interesting narratives going on here, which I'll just draw your attention to. This is a kind of semantic space. So things that are close together are similar in terms of the energy behind them, the innate implicit meaning. So there's something here which is about general attention seeking. Look at me, I'm Donald Trump. There's something here which is about retweeting stuff that, you know, is saying that people like him. Quite ego-driven stuff, isn't it? Big surprise. Is there anyone from Langley here? Okay, just checking. Big buildings. It's got to be there, hasn't it? And then there's other stuff over here which is, you know, much more interesting in terms of what's being surfaced. There's a topic here called witch hunting, which is core distraction stuff, both attack and defense. Very relevant to the kinds of work that you guys are up to. There's a topic here, a theme called dog whistling. Basically a lot of shout-outs to the core base. There's Make America Great Again, celebrating me. Lots of things going on. The question is, how does it play out over time with those energies? So this is the, at the risk of giving you a migraine, this is the EEG of Donald Trump. A 10-year story of his tweets. A couple of things to note before we even start, right? So this blue bar, the energy about patriotism, making America great again, solving America's problems, has been there from 2010. Always been present in his narrative. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Really starts to peak here, of course, which is full-on campaign mode. Let's look at some of the others. So look at me. This is a general attention-seeking energy. Okay, but they all interrelate. It's not a one-to-one. It's not classifying. It's about, you know, innate motivations. When he starts, this is the earliest speculation of his candidacy, when he starts researching a possible run for presidency, this is when the amplifying support gets going. Lots of retweets about, you know, people urging him to run. You'd be the best president. You must run. Lots and lots of that. He launched his campaign, and this Make America Great Again narrative kicks in, telling the story. He achieves the nomination, and immediately start getting this distractive witch hunting narrative. Now this relates to Crooked Hillary, it relates to, you know, fake news media. It relates to, no collusion. All of those things get brought together under the heading of that weird, distractive energy behind those tweets. And once he's elected, we start to see him flip immediately into this kind of energy of dog whistling, which is sending out essentially messages to his core base, trying to distract and reinforce. And during that period, he gets angrier and angrier and angrier, and all the sort of positive emotions die away. This is quite a cross chap, many points. So I'll flick through some of the basics. But the key point is you can measure the kind of strength of these signals in the narrative. And because Trump's such a clear example, it's a nice way of seeing a narrative flow through real events. You can do that at scale. You can do that across many, many accounts. We're looking at things like LeaveEU in the UK at the moment. You can look at it in terms of general listening for signals if you know what you're looking for, at speed and scale. And it's pretty clear that, as we all know, this is all about essentially distraction, shoring up his support base for the future. But there's more. Have you come across the good old Jungian archetypes of storytelling? Okay, another kind of core bit of semiotic concept, right? How you tell a story and the characters that are in there. And you can look at any data set within reason in a similar way. So we've built these archetypes to show what the innate character of communications is all about. Very relevant to advertising. In this case, very relevant to Donald Trump. Now, he's always the hero of his own movie. But the tone of these energies is very different. This is the dog whistling. Very much hero-oriented. The ruler is present, but also a strong everyman signal. He is calling out to, the ordinary people of the United States, the left behind. That's his core base. Witch hunting is very much a rebel innocent narrative. Still got the ruler there, but very much a rebel innocent kind of narrative going on there. He's portraying himself in a completely different way. Make America Great Again is transformative. It's got that magician feel, and it's also anchored in this caregiver narrative. Now, these signals can tell us quite a lot about what's going on in terms of transmitted communication, but also how people are likely to receive messages. So surfacing patterns in this way allows specific signal detection, and it's not something you necessarily have to train, okay, because this is about pattern recognition. Then you interpret it, and then you can deploy it in all sorts of different ways. So the final example I wanted to share is more visual, actually. So AI, something we've been working on a great deal, is reading meaning into imagery. So not simply recognizing that there are stones and leaves in this picture, but that there is an encoded metaphor of harmony and peace and balance and calm. Feels quite intuitive, doesn't it? But, with my cultural analyst, semiotician's hat on, it's actually quite a hard job to get the machines to do that, right? It's not something that is particularly mainstream. We found it really, really powerful, though, in the world of commercial communications. And again, I feel there can be applications to strategic comms in a governmental sense. So rather than saying, hey, there's some stones, oh, there's a maze, right? What it's giving us back is a sense of the emotional content that's being transmitted by those images and, the deeper concepts and meanings behind them. And that tells us a lot about how people are likely to react to that imagery if they're in the target audience. You can, of course, do this at scale. I'll just focus on a couple that we've been doing in codes of women's health. Again, you see, innate similarity between these images. You see a reading on what they're all about, what are they transmitting about female health, much more hero, ruler-oriented. Contrast this, much more caregiver-oriented, this sense of pampering. Now, it's a work in progress, but that gives you a flavour of what semiotics is all about and how it can be deployed. I'll just finish off with a couple of examples. So, this is an iconic celebration from Megan Rapinoe, US football player. What is it communicating to you? Anybody? I'm sorry? Confidence is good. Yeah, anything else? I told you so. You're not wrong. What about this one? It's very, very disturbingly powerful, isn't it? This was actually sent out by our cuddly friends at LeaveEU, right? The hard Brexit campaigning organisation. And interestingly, it was withdrawn under great pressure, okay? It didn't land how they'd hoped, with good reason. I mean, you can see immediately, from a human intuition point of view, what this is attempting to communicate. Which just shows the Brits aren't completely mad, right? But let's look at what we pick up from these images. So, there's Megan, she's the hero, right? Core codes, challenge, empowerment, mastery, achievement, bit of drama. Courage, aspiration, dominance, legacy, that's quite interesting. And a sense of belonging. All comes through these various metrics that we deploy, but both on text and imagery, and increasingly video, actually. Let's see what this one has to say. Well, it comes across as both very angry and very fearful. There's an element of rebellion. It's anxiety, fear, conflict, peril, alienation, submission, hate, depersonalization, subservience, and disempowerment. All very, very negative, but very powerful signals, actually. So the power of visual language is also measurable, and that, to me, seems increasingly important in the world of memes, etc., and the way that people then respond to them. So I just wanted to finish off. Now, artificial intelligence is, as we know, not that intelligent, right? So anybody who tells you it's intelligent is lying to you. You have to kind of, broadly speaking, tell it what to do in order for it to take all of the donkey work out of looking at large-scale stuff. It's not going to think for itself. You've got to build models and metrics that it can work with. But it does evolve and it does learn, and it gives you unexpected things too. And my great interest is how we take the next step from just counting words and concepts, okay, trying to identify things that way, towards looking at hidden signals that potentially can help with communications and audience understanding. So, back to my theme. I don't think artificial intelligence is the witch, right? But I do think it can be a real good aid to human understanding and a big saver on workload. No one's ever going to read every single bit of Twitter, right? But it's also quite reliable, so you can literally say, well, actually, you know, the meaning of that is quite close to the meaning of this, or it's miles away from the meaning of that other thing over there. On my point about unsafe content, which, and we're now deploying this on things like Russia Today and Sputnik, as well as the Daily Mail, all quite similar, really. You know, the emotive language that dominates and that kind of intensity is quite a signifier of unsafe content for brands. Hypothesis, is it also a signifier for things that you guys need to know about? Is it also a signifier for things that you need to do to counteract that? That's a difficult one. I was at another conference last week talking to one of the people who work at the EU Commission, more on health. And they were talking about the problems with the increase in measles rates, right, as a result of these anti-vaccination campaigns. And they couldn't seem to counter it with facts, right? So I said to him, like, half jokingly, well, why don't you just start a campaign that says, if you don't vaccinate your baby, you are personally responsible for thousands of deaths. Now, no one's ever going to do that, but the point is it's very difficult to counteract that kind of intensity of emotion that, say, the anti-vax people put out with straightforward facts and figures, okay? There has to be a middle ground, I think, for your guys. Patterns are signals, so I see that as potentially early warning signifiers, for example. And the Holy Grail, I think, is then deploying some of the visual language metrics onto video analytics, which is, you know, complex but likely to be core going forward. The point is, you know, it is possible to read between the lines. You can take it a step further than simply object recognition. So anyway, a few insights in the world of commercial stuff. I hope they're useful. Good luck with that.
Thank you.